This is HBR News number 531. BLM leader charged with fraud and laundering, teaching boys to respect, where we discuss the news of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. I hope you guys are doing well this week and that you're laughing at all of this absurdity so that you are not consumed by it. I'm your host, Brian. I'm joined by, as always, my lovely co-hosts, Dr. Random McCam and Hannah Wallen. Why did I pause? I don't know.
I did not.
On today's HBR News show, we're going to be looking at a couple of follow-up stories for things that we covered earlier on this channel. We're also going to be looking at the shooting in Australia, and it seems like there's a convergence of pushing, initiatives being pushed that are basically saying that boys are going to start respecting women or else, and more, so stick around, it's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. We're going to be looking at this article, because this is the thing that's been going around a lot. This is an article on Monash University, on their website Lens, I guess. I'm not really sure what order, if it's Lens of Monash or Monash of Lens, I don't know. And it is entitled, Misogyny is Thriving in Our Schools. Why aren't we doing more? What are we going to do about it? I don't know, but we're going to look at this article.
Maybe it's because all the teachers are women.
Yeah.
If all the authority figures are women, then there's going to be any pushback against authority is going to be seen as misogyny because all the authority figures are women. Maybe it's a correlation or something.
Yeah, maybe.
It just blows my mind. I thought that they were supposed to only teach actual fact, scientific fact, historical fact, mathematical fact, and the correct usage of language, reading, such like that. Misogyny isn't real.
No.
We will, of course, get into this in the third and fourth stories tonight. It's a long show. It's a packed show.
It's a packed show for sure. Packed show. All right. Well, if you want to join us for the patron show and find out what it is they're going to do about misogyny thriving in their schools, you have to become a Badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com. $5 a month will get you into the Discord where you'll be able to watch all of the additional content, including this patron show. And if you give it higher levels, you'll be able to join in the conversation yourself. That's feedthebadger.com/subscribe. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find that we've been yeeted from the internet because we have wrong thunk for too long, and people are noticing, then go to badgerfeed.com or honeybadgerradio.com to find where all of our content lives. All right, so with that out of the way, let us get into today's stories. First, we have a little follow-up. I'm not going to cover it now, but we also had a tiny follow-up for the DoorDash girl. I don't know if you guys heard about when she went to the courtroom and she showed up, and I guess they had cameras in the courtroom. So it was one of those.
And she didn't like that.
And she didn't like that. And the judge says,
I took that personally.
I thought that was funny.
That's great.
But it was too small to make a story. But I just thought I would throw that out there. I know about the DoorDash girl and her issue with the courtroom having cameras in it. But we're going to talk about Bonnie Blue. Bonnie Blue, a British adult content creator, real name Tia Billinger, who's 26-year-old, even though she looks like she's 40, from the UK, known for controversial stunts like claiming to have slept with over 1,000 men in 12 hours, was arrested in Bali, Indonesia on December 4th, 2025, during a police raid on a rented studio. Authorities allege she and a group of about 17 to 34 male tourists, mostly young British and Australian men, were producing pornographic content in violation of the country's very strict anti-pornography laws, which carry a maximum penalty of up to 15 years in prison and hefty fines around £270,000 or more. By the way, Indonesia, I believe, highest concentration of Muslims in the world. So it's the most Muslim country in the world.
It's the highest populated Muslim country.
The highest population of Muslims. Yeah, highest population.
Bali happens to be mostly occupied by Hindus, but it's still subject to. It's still part of Indonesia, so it's still subject to Islamic laws.
Yeah. So, anyway, the raid followed public complaints about her bang bus vehicle, which is a branded pickup truck pictured here, and social media posts targeting barely legal participants during Australia's Schoolies Week celebrations. Police seized cameras, contraceptives, sex toys, lubricants, Viagra, branded clothing, and the vehicle itself, initially investigating for immoral or explicit material production on a tourist visa. Ultimately, no evidence of completed pornographic content filmed in Bali was found, and Bonnie Blue was cleared of all serious pornography charges. Instead, she faced minor offenses: a traffic violation, misusing a goods vehicle by carrying passengers. In America, and if you were a dude driving, that would be called trafficking, but I guess here it's just a traffic violation. An immigration breach, working as a content creator on a tourist visa. She was fined around $20. Wow, that's nothing. Which is about 15 pounds. Ordered deported and banned from Indonesia for at least 10 years, including Bali. Blue returned to the UK by mid-December 2025, later mocking the incident online, claiming good lawyers helped her avoid jail, and teasing fans with the unreleased content that sparked the controversy. Most of the detained men were released without any charges.
Most?
Yeah, it's most. We don't know the details of it, but yeah.
This is one of those, like, I'll bet you there's more to this story. And the real serious question here is, why go there with all that shit? Why someplace that doesn't want you doing that there, when there are countries all over the world where nobody gives a fuck if you do that? And the only reason is to be provocative and controversial, get into trouble, make a name for yourself. Guaranteed, if there'd been some actual repercussions to her for her actions, and not just to the men who showed up with her, then there would be hell to pay, right? She'd suddenly be a martyr for the feminist cause, and it would be all about misogyny, not a nation enforcing its laws, right? And the nation says, you cannot do this here, it is illegal, and she went there to do that. And I don't believe for a minute that that's not what they were doing, considering everything that was seized. She's lucky that she wasn't in one of the countries where they don't give a fuck if you're a foreigner or not when they're arresting for things like fornication, because all that stuff would have just been used to put her.
I mean, Thailand is right there.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, she really is quite fortunate, and probably got off on a little bit of female privilege there, and a little bit of Westerner privilege, where the nation was like, well, we don't want an international incident here, so we're going to bend over backwards to not do anything to this woman. But yeah, if most of the men didn't get into trouble, that means some of them did. And that's the thing. When you associate yourself with a woman who makes stupid decisions like this, and I'm not talking about the sex, I'm talking about, let's go to a foreign country and violate known laws of that country on purpose, right? That when you associate yourself with a woman who does something like that, she's not going to be the one that faces the repercussions. It's going to be you. And you know that if there's serious trouble to be had, that somebody's head's going to roll, she's going to turn around and say, you made her do it. Even if it was her idea, even if she planned the whole thing, even if she signed up for it just as much as you did or more, you're going to take the fall. Anytime a woman comes down from a pedestal, whether she steps down, whether she falls down, right? Whether she jumps off, or whether somebody shakes her off of it. On her way down, somebody else is going to break her fall every single time. And this is the way it goes. Sure, she's going to make fun of them now because she's not there and they can't do anything to her, right? Hopefully, the guys that she got into trouble there aren't either, because if she does that and they are still in the country, she could make things worse for them. The fact that she's promised to do that, it's too late for her to not do it and not make things worse for them. So I really hope she didn't leave anybody behind when she left. But yeah, this is really bad. People might not think so. People might think it's funny. People might think it's misogynistic because they busted a woman for sexual behaviors and stuff. But like I said, if you know, just the same as if you know it's illegal to use a particular substance in a foreign country, it is not misogyny for them to bust you and hold you and use you as collateral against another country. It's not because you're female. It's because you're a fucking dumbass who went to a foreign country and knowingly broke a law that is major and publicly available, publicly known, and openly cultural in that nation. So, she lucked out. I hope that the guys that she got into trouble there didn't get into too much trouble. Obviously, that doesn't seem to have been reported in terms of what happened to them. But I guess people only care about what happened to the female, huh?
Yeah, the word grifter is thrown around all too much these days, but sometimes actually, no, it doesn't necessarily apply here either. What we have here is an attention whore, which isn't quite the same as a grifter. I mean, what we have here is a normal, plain, common or garden whore, but it stands to reason that it's an attention whore on top of that. It couldn't be more obvious that everything she does is a publicity stunt. I still don't actually believe that she actually did fuck 1,000 men in a day. I don't think it's logistically possible. I'm not convinced she's ever even fucked anyone, and I'm not willing to go searching for the evidence. I'm not particularly interested, and I feel bad for anyone who is particularly interested. And given that the Indonesian police couldn't find any evidence either, I'm going to go ahead and assume she didn't fuck anyone there either, and that this was just a publicity stunt. To some degree, I'm okay with publicity stunts. I'm actually in favor of them if the purpose is to raise awareness of an important issue. But the purpose of this publicity stunt was to raise the public profile of an insatiable attention whore. She has nothing of interest to say, and she's not even trying to say anything of interest. She's just farming outrage for the sake of being famous. And frankly, fair play to her. It's working. Here we are, still talking about her. Because boy, howdy, everyone loves a sex scandal. And she's trying to push the envelope to all new heights when it comes to sex scandals. But like I said, I'm not convinced any of this is real. And even if it is, I'm not going to get angry or indignant about it, because that is clearly what she wants. It's a constructed and contrived soap opera for the modern age, concocted by someone who doesn't have the artistic skills or the political acumen to do anything worthwhile. Is obviously a TARP, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone is falling for the tarp. So that's all I have to say. I will not rise to the bait any higher than this, any closer to the surface of the water than I currently am at. I hereby sink back down to the riverbed, where I will continue to bottom feed. I suggest you all join me. This whole thing is bullshit, and if you want it to stop, you have to stop biting. I can think of a million things I'd rather talk about, and some of them are coming up later in the show, like people getting murdered and whatnot.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
The only thing I'll say about this, because I wanted to follow up on it since it was going on. I think this was, unless something absolutely insane happens, I probably won't be covering more of the hijinks of Bonnie Blue. But there is something about this story that I thought was interesting, which I read, but I don't know, like for some reason, a lot of people did not glom onto this, and I think it's something that's worth pointing out. So apparently there were barely legal participants during Australia's Schoolies Week celebrations. So she was advertising to potentially underage boys. And this might be, I don't know, like if they didn't have any evidence, or maybe the Indonesian laws of consent are different or whatever. But this was just something I wanted to point out, because I think that she could have crossed a line or come close to crossing a line with this kind of stuff. And I thought that was just something worth pointing out. So just one more time, according to the reports that we have, there were public complaints about her bang bus vehicle. So people who were there, who saw it in Indonesia, in Bali. And there were social media posts by her targeting barely legal participants during Australia's Schoolies Week celebrations.
Something to think about there. If you have, like, barely legal means the individual can be charged as an adult. Mm-hmm. If you talk them into doing something illegal in a foreign country, say Australian teenagers that just got out of maybe their junior or senior year in high school, whatever Australia calls that. She could have gotten some 18 or 19-year-old, just barely old enough to join the military, just barely old enough probably to vote unless their elections are 21 and over. But if he was in the United States, he'd be just, a U.S. citizen. He'd be just barely old enough to vote, just barely old enough to be held accountable as an adult, and gotten him stuck in jail in a foreign country where the laws and the punishments are significantly more harsh than his home country. Beware of women like this, women who want attention more than they want anything else, for themselves, by the way, because she's making money off of this, but there are other ways to make a lot of money besides selling sex. And you really have to beware the woman who has to engage in lots of people, by the way, sell sex without this type of hijinks too. And they make plenty of money doing it. She's dangerous. And no guy should trust her. If she gives somebody legal advice, you can do this because, don't listen to her, because clearly she doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about. She got in trouble. She got kicked out of a country, and she got some of the guys that were with her in trouble. It's really dangerous.
Yeah. Well, anyway, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Just a little follow up, and I don't know, could there be an issue with age? Possibly. I'd be curious about that, because if boys are being exploited, then it's interesting that it's glossed over if that's happening. So anyway, let us know what you guys think about that one in the comments. We're going to move on to the next story. That was just a little follow up. All right. So, pictured here is the location of this story. So last evening, as members of the local Jewish community and others had congregated in Sydney, Australia's famous Bondi Beach, a shooting occurred. The nearly 1,000 people who gathered around the area of Archer Park to celebrate the first night of Hanukkah scrambled as shots ran out targeting them. As the two gunmen opened fire, one of them pressed on towards the group, still firing. At this point, a heroic bystander by the name of Ahmed al-Ahmed, or Ahmed al-Ahmed, I think is how you should say it, rushed the advancing gunman and wrestled away his shotgun, but either due to unwillingness, unfamiliarity with the firearm, or malfunction, was unable to return fire on the retreating attacker, who returned to where the shooting began, picked up a rifle, and began firing again. Ahmed was eventually shot by one of the two shooters, but is recovering now at a local hospital. Police eventually arrived on the scene, and after a brief gunfight, one of the gunmen was dead and the other was taken into custody. The two shooters would later be identified as a father and son, 50-year-old Sajid Akram and 24-year-old Naveed Akram. The older of the two would be the one who died on the scene. Both men were using firearms that were legally acquired and were in good standing and compliance with all existing Australian gun laws prior to the incident for at least 10 years. Police also discovered several improvised explosive devices that were eventually deactivated and removed from the area. The motive for the attack seems to be Islamist in nature, with Islamic State flags being discovered in the father and son's vehicle, as well as the two having recently visited the island of Mindanao in the Philippines, which has been a hotbed of Islamist insurgent activity in the past years. One of the gunmen was investigated in 2019 over such possible ties, but was ultimately not classified as a person of interest. At least 15 people died in or after the attack, and nearly 30 people were hospitalized. The age of the victims ranged from 10 to 87 years old.
I don't want to lean too much into some kind of Norm Macdonald joke. But in a way, I'm more outraged by the Australian government's response to this than I am by the dozens of casualties. And not because of the backlash against peaceful Muslims, but because of the distinct lack of it. Anthony Albanese, Australia's chief grand pookuk, said a number of things that warrant one or two hands in the air. He called the attack anti-Semitism. How do you know it's anti-Semitism? Because the gunmen happened to attack the area during a Hanukkah celebration. Yeah, all right, fair enough. Given that there's about 12 Jews in the entire country, it's probably not a coincidence that this took place as and where all 12 of those Jews might be congregating. I suppose we can chalk it up to collateral damage that the majority of the victims were not Jewish. But ho-hum, them's the breaks. The innocent, conscientious objectors of the Anglosphere once again have to face the consequences of this never-ending war between ruthless Middle Eastern religions. So who else are you going to blame for this, Anthony, other than anti-Semites? Oh, the far right, you say. And we know what he means by far right. He means the conscientious objectors of the Anglosphere who would rather just have their countries to themselves and not get involved in this never-ending war between ruthless Middle Eastern religions. One can't help but notice that he didn't mention the religion of the perpetrators of this crime. Apparently that is just a coincidence. If Jews are the projected victims, it must be because they're Jews. But if the perpetrators are Muslims affiliated with Islamic terrorist groups, we can't just go ahead and speculate that it might be because they're Muslims affiliated with Islamic terrorist organizations. No. Heavens to Abu Dhabi, no. But we can certainly go ahead and speculate as to the religion of the brave hero who disarmed one of the terrorists. His name was Ahmed al-Ahmed, so he must be a Muslim, and he must have made this heroic gesture because he's a Muslim. I've heard the conflicting reports that he might be a Lebanese Christian. I've heard it from all manner of angles, but no one's giving me any receipts So I don't know how they came about this information, and I still don't know what to think. As usual, all I can do is examine the reactions of the government officials who are supposed to be in charge of safeguarding the people of the nation in question. And what is the Australian government planning to do in response to these atrocities? Well, of course, they're going to make gun control laws even more strict than they already were, and they're going to crack down on hate speech even more than they already are. They're going to punish the Australian people for the crime of being victims of a crime. Imagine if you're in a war, right? Actually, you don't have to imagine it. We are in a war. Islam is always and forever engaged in a war against every infidel and every nation occupied by infidels. Well, given that we're in a war, consider what happens whenever a captain calls up a general and says, I say, General, our front infantry division has suffered heavy losses. There are dead bodies everywhere, General. What on earth should we do? And how does the general respond? By crikey, Captain, you'd better disarm that infantry division immediately. Confiscate their guns. Confiscate their munitions. Make sure they can't fight back ever again. Frankly, sorry, General. Not only does that make negative bloody sense, but furthermore, we already did that 3 bloody decades ago. They've been sitting ducks ever since. That's rather why they're getting gunned down in the dozens with no recourse, old chap. Well, then, disable their communications. Shut down all radio frequencies. If any of them try to coordinate with each other in some kind of counter-offensive, have them court-martialed. Yes, once again, General, it pains me to remind you that we already did that. We'll do it even harder, damn it! Yes, sir. I'll see what we can do. Tally-ho, and all that. I know this little skit of mine sounds facetious, but this is exactly what's happening. We are in a war, but we are taking our orders from barking mad bastards who are not interested in fighting the war, let alone winning it, because they remain blissfully unaware that we are at war. They think the terrorists the terrorists with guns who keep flooding across our borders are just doctors and engineers from the Red fucking Cross or something. We could actually, we could get hit with a dirty bomb in the capital city, and these lunatics in charge will probably respond by dropping another dirty bomb in the same city just to make sure that the far right doesn't retaliate in any backlash against the peaceful Muslims. Meanwhile, these other lunatics on the internet, these ostensibly right-wing lunatics, will go, oh man, would you look at all this suicidal empathy? The problem with these insane generals is that they're just too empathetic. That's why they're dropping nuclear dirty bombs on their own people. It's because they're just so full of love. But don't worry, lads. We're winning. They're definitely putting the woke away. The left has realized that they can't get away with this anymore, and they're finally retracting from this madness. What the fuck is wrong with people? Seriously, we are not winning. It keeps getting worse. Our enemies are not conceding defeat, and they sure as fuck are not suffering from empathy. They fucking hate us. They want us dead. Will you please snap out of this delusional bravado and beating your chests over victories that are blatantly not happening? We didn't get this fucked because of black pills. We got this fucked because of white pills. Because you stupid cunts are addicted to white pills. There's nothing else in your fucking diet. You need to face the reality. We are losing. We are getting murdered. And the demons who are murdering us are only getting bolder and crazier and more accelerated in their bloodthirsty violence. You want woke to be dead, but the only woke that is in fact dead is your waking conscience. You keep falling asleep on the job in the fatuous assumption that you've already saved everyone. You haven't. You're living in a fantasy, a savior fantasy, where you think all you have to do is give people hope and you'll have saved everyone. Fuck hope. Hope has failed us. Hope has painted us into a corner. It's time to go in the other direction, folks. What do I mean by the other direction from hope? Despair? No. Paranoia. You need to get paranoid. And you need to stay paranoid because they are coming to get you. I don't know how much more evidence you need. They want you dead and they will never stop. So do what you got to do. Smoke some fucking weed, drink some fucking coffee, get anxious, get paranoid, and get fucking scared because you should be. Make like a goddamn roof Korean. Stand at the top of your property with a gun and a pack of sandwiches, or you are going to die. Sick of it, man. Fucking sick of it.
Yep. I want to remind people of something that doesn't sound like it has anything to do at first with this story. But during the earlier part of this year and part of last year, HBR Talk went over the history of voting rights in countries that started out as English colonies, countries that were colonized by the British and then taken over by groups of people that included the original British colonists or their descendants, and then evolved as nations that are all like these nice Western first world nations now. And one of the things we learned was that Australia started out from the beginning as it developed its national laws, its constitution. Can't remember if that's what it was called or not, but essentially the scaffolding on which its national laws are based and everything. Female voting was already part of that. It was a country that had women's voting rights from the beginning, and this is the result. Essentially, women prefer to feel safe, even if they are not, over and above the freedom to protect themselves from danger, and the freedom for the men around them to do what comes natural to men and confront danger and handle it instead of waiting for someone else to come along and help. And it's not that men should have to do that. It's not that society has any to obligate men to do that. It just happens. It is a thing that men do. And that the guy that stepped up in this situation didn't do it because of some law that said, if you see somebody shooting people, it's your obligation to risk your life and try to disarm them and do something about the situation if you're male. He did it because that is his tendency. This is happening in front of me. I have to do something about it. I might get killed if I don't. I might as well get killed trying to do something about it, right? Other people are going to get killed if I don't. And that's the way men react. And it's not universal, right? And it shouldn't have to be for people to acknowledge that it is pretty normal for guys. So what you end up with in this situation is that women have voted for politicians over and over again that see men as individuals who would step up and defend their homes and their families, individuals that would do it themselves rather than calling for help, and would only call for help if they were in dire straits and could trust the people they were calling, and say, well, these people are a problem. We got to do something about that. Let's disarm them. Let's take away their communications. Let's make them afraid, because if they don't depend on us, they won't give us power. And we want power. And therefore, it has to be illegal for them to be prepared to do this. And that's pretty much the way women have voted in every nation that women have voting rights throughout the history of women's voting rights, which goes all the way back to the beginning of voting rights in Western nations. It's just that early on, when only 3 or less % of the UK, of England, had voting rights, the number of voters who were female, because they were landowners, was tiny, and they were far outnumbered by the men. And so this nonsense of voting for babysitters to take away your self-startability, your self-defensibility, right? That didn't fly. But now it does. And there is only one way for men to deal with this. And you want to say, well, obviously women shouldn't vote. Yeah, but that's not happening. Women are voting, and it's unlikely in the near future that that's going to change. And the only women who are recognizing that women shouldn't vote are the ones who support masculinity and men's right to do things men's way. So it's not really helpful. What men need to do is become a voting bloc and recognize the difference between feeling safe and being safe. And that difference is having control over your own safety, your own environment, your own circumstances, and only having to ask for help when things get dire. So men are going to have to outvote women. I had an argument with a feminist about this. There are, we've heard of like up to 4 waves of feminism. The third wavers started talking about a 4th wave about 10 years ago and described it in various ways. But my way of identifying the 4th wave, that's the nice feminist wave, right? They're the ones that aren't responsible for any of the terrible things that feminism has done, despite supporting all of it and supporting the ideology behind it. So 4th wave feminists are the ones that will tell you that everything bad feminism has done is just not their feminism. Where the 3rd wavers are the ones that'll say, well, that's not real feminism, because real feminism is about equality. The 4th wavers are, oh, well, that's not my feminism. That's their feminism. My feminism is about this. And you can't lump me in with them because I'm not that kind of feminist. So the 5th wave are the ones who will tell you, but that's not feminist like the 3rd wavers did, but about themselves. I'm not being a feminist just because I blame men for everything. I'm not being a feminist just because I demand more regulation on men and masculinity so that I can feel safe. I'm not being a feminist just because I'm demonizing men as deadbeats and abusers. Well, yes, you are. That all came from feminism. Right? So this 5th wave, I would call covert feminism. And I'm noticing quite a bit of it among tradcon women who will acknowledge that women shouldn't vote, because the danger of them actually losing their voting rights is slim to none, and Slim just left town. Right? They will acknowledge that Men do nearly everything better than women do. Nearly everything that's important. And don't really need women for much of anything, except that it's nice to come home to a comfortable and well-kept home environment. And so it is nice for a man to have a wife who is supportive and loving and caring and takes care of him. And so then they'll want to be stay-at-home moms and homemakers, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to take care of a man for your whole life, right? But what they won't do is acknowledge that the safety nets need to go. Maybe the welfare safety net, because that's coming out of their husband's pocket, right? But they won't acknowledge that these other safety nets, these laws that are intended to protect women, anti-misogyny laws, and so on, need to go. They won't acknowledge that it's wrong to tell a man that he's the bad guy if he stops people from engaging in violence against his community. They won't acknowledge that it's women's fault that all of this shit has happened, that people have been disarmed, that people's communications are being attacked, right? And yeah, Jen Bottle, they're not needed. They're not. They're nice when they're supportive, but they're not needed. Like a man can live his whole life without a woman in it, and he's not going to die from some disparity in his life that he should have had this or that, and he doesn't. He's not going to want for shelter, food, clothing, none of that. But in any case, yeah, this, and I will say, not the shooting, but the behavior of the politicians is due to the fact that men have allowed women to control politics in nations where women have voting rights and the right to run for office. So the thing that I started to say that needs to happen, and I've mentioned this before, right? Particularly young men who are well aware that most of the things that are fucked in your life are fucked because of the government doing what women ask them to do to you. So you need to start taking it over. The men's rights movement needs its march through the institutions, and it can't be a long march. It needs to happen quickly. Young men need to take over government, take over media, and take over the enforcement powers by going into those professions. Run for office, blog, post. The meme war is not actually a joke. It's not a minor thing. It's incredibly important. You can shut down someone's stupid argument with the right meme. And as long as people don't realize that, particularly as long as the boomers and the older Gen Xers don't realize that, that's a power that you have, especially if you're able to be irreverent, somewhat shocking, make people laugh at woke ideology. And mostly woke ideology is the ideology of safety nets and using the potential to be embarrassed by being accused of isms and phobias as a means of gaining power. If you can make fun of that in a way that makes it ridiculous and people can't accept it and follow it because of it, you have more power than you can possibly imagine. So do those things. Make it so that, just as today, if people want electricity, they have to accommodate men. If people want homes built, they have to accommodate men. If people want roads, they have to accommodate men. If people want emergency workers, they have to accommodate men. And if people want politicians to listen to them, they have to accommodate men. Because otherwise, they will continue to ignore you and do shit like this that allows more of these types of attacks. And when your community is attacked by someone and there is violence, instead of blaming the people who engaged in the violence and the causes behind the violence, whether it's ideology or gang violence or anything like that, they'll blame you. So it's on you. And I hate to say that. I hate to not offer a solution that I can help with, but I'm not a young man. I'm an old woman. Not really old, just middle-aged. But still a woman. And that's not going to solve anything if a bunch of us get in there. There will always be some point at which the majority, even those that say they're on your side, even those that believe they're on your side, even those that wholeheartedly want to be on your side, there's always going to be some point at which they draw a line and say, no, men have too much freedom and too much power, and I'm not safe because of that, and therefore this must be regulated. So it's up to you guys. Take over. Run for office. Vote together. And again, not for another nanny state. It's the only thing I've got to offer. And I'm sorry it's not better. Like Mike said, you have to be paranoid. And part of being paranoid is anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And the only person who can stop it is you. That's it.
All right. Well, yeah, it's a real unfortunate incident, and yeah, I'll just echo what you guys said. I don't think you would think that Australia would learn that banning the weapon doesn't do anything, and it just basically makes vulnerable the people who are law abiding. So, but let us know what you guys think about this. One of the comments, I did get a super chow from Meredith G. Thank you, Meredith, for that.
All right.
And she gave us $10 and said, HBR News number 531, additional information about the Bondi Beach incident. The rabbi of the temple had made multiple requests for additional security, and the government didn't provide any additional security despite the fact that there were multiple known threats on the event. Also, the shooters had returned from the Philippines after attending a terrorist training camp. Yeah, I read that in the write-up. And this was known to the government. And keep in mind that Australia has had multiple incidents of violence directed at the country's small Jewish population. But remember what they keep telling us, nothing to see here. All right, thank you,
It almost
Meredith.
sounds like they wanted this to happen so that they could use it as political fodder. Yet another reason for young men to take over their nation's political control.
Yeah. Another thing I will also add, just like to, help clear the air, because some people were saying that what happened in Australia had something to do with the war in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine. And it isn't really about that, because Israel is like in a conflict with Palestine and Gaza, but it's also Hamas is like the primary faction there. And these guys were not part of Hamas. They were part of ISIS, as far as we know. And I know you might say that's all the same, but they're not quite the same. So it's just worth pointing out that what's happening in Australia, what?
Why don't these folks just go straight to Israel and start gunning people down?
They can't get in unless they're let in.
They can't get in, and it's because everyone in Israel is fucking armed.
Yes,
just in case this shit happens. So they go to countries where nobody's armed, so they can kill as many people as possible. They don't even care about how many Jews they kill. They just want to kill as many people as possible. Because
yes,
Because well, I'm about to say something that could get me arrested. So
Maybe don't.
I think I already
But-
did.
Yeah.
But I'll stop.
All I'll say is that those guys are supposedly associated with ISIS, not Hamas. Hamas is fighting Israel in Gaza or being blown up. I don't know. Whatever. I'm not going to speak on that. That's not what this is about. All right. So with that said, we're going to move on to the next story. So in other news, today is mine and Lindsay's 9th wedding anniversary. Okay, now we're going to move on to the actual news. The next
Congratulations.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, our 9th anniversary. I wanted to mention it. We had the first time we ever had like a good meal in Roanoke. I'm not saying that the food stinks, but we don't eat out, and most of the time it's disappointing. Like unless you like fast food, like we get, every so often we'll get Domino's or something. But today we tried a new place, a Peruvian place, and it was delicious. And I was really glad we did that. So I had to do that before the show, but yeah, so it's our 9th anniversary. And what that means is, it's not impossible. That's all I'm saying. Only 9 years. We'll see.
I enjoy it every time I eat out.
Yes. Oh.
What? Are your mind's in the gutter or something? What you saying? What you?
Oh God. Okay.
That's not what I meant.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay.
That was awful and great at the same time.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. I too enjoy food to go. All right. So moving on to the next story. A leaked internal 53-page legal dossier from the Green Party of England and Wales, prepared by the party's own lawyers and first reported by the Telegraph on December 13th, 2025, revealed concerns over a draft guidance document on identifying misogyny and sexism. The document, which the Green Party Council was reportedly very close to adopting into its ethics framework, listed, quote, being corrected, end quote, as an example of misogynistic behavior that women experience. Lawyers warned this definition was overly broad, no pun intended, potentially allowing any disagreement where a man corrects a woman to be treated as a sanctionable disciplinary offense, exposing the party to legal and reputational risks. The dossier also highlighted similar issues with proposed rules on transphobia and queerphobia. Oh, that's new. Suggesting they could unlawfully discriminate against members holding gender-critical views protected under the Equality Act 2010. The Green Party responded by stating that parts of the leaked report were factually inaccurate, while acknowledging the need to improve disciplinary processes and address delays in handling complaints. No confirmation was given that the controversial guidance was ultimately adopted. This story emerges amid ongoing internal tensions in the party over transgender rights and gender critical beliefs, because, gotta have our priorities straight in the UK, including past legal defeats, examples paying damages to former deputy leader Sharar Ali over discrimination claims, and expulsions of members expressing views on biological sex. Coverage has been primarily in right-leaning outlets like the Daily Mail and Telegraph. I don't think the Daily Mail is right-leaning, but framing it critically with limited pickup in left-leaning or mainstream sources like The Guardian or BBC as of mid-December 2025.
By the way, guys, a brief reminder, and then I'll hand it over to Mike before I say anything else. Misogyny isn't real. It's not real. There is no such thing. It doesn't exist. I'll explain when Mike is done.
All right, this might take a while. It's funny about how people are dooming about this as though it's not already the case, as though we're not already being tormented by human resources cyborgs who will indeed discipline you whenever you endeavor to insinuate that any given woman is in some way wrong. Because that's mansplaining, you see. That's misogyny. That's harassment. I know there's something ambiguous about the verb correcting, like how a correction facility is a bit like a concentration camp. It's a euphemism for something extremely sinister, but We're talking about when a woman claims that 6 times 7 is 56, and a man counterclaims that 6 times 7 is in fact 42. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is as close as we can get to the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. If we can't agree that 2 plus 2 is 4, and that everything follows from that, then we literally can't agree on anything. And that's about where we are at this point. If a woman wants to claim that 2 plus 2 is 5, and yes, they absolutely can, and they absolutely will claim that this is the case just because they can, then a man is not permitted to, quote unquote, correct her, lest he be sent, ironically enough, to a correction facility. There he will be physically and psychologically tortured until he consents to agree that there are, in fact, 5 lights. And like I said, this is nothing new. It keeps getting further and further ingrained into the corporate and scholastic worlds. But we've already been putting up with it for generations. You know the phrase, happy wife, happy life? And shit like that? That's what that means. It doesn't matter how catastrophically wrong she is. You have to shut the fuck up and let her be wrong. And when the inevitable catastrophe happens, you need to shut the fuck up and bear the consequences of that catastrophe and act like it was all your fault. Because if you don't, she'll divorce you and you'll lose everything. I mean, she'll do that anyway, even if you simp like a lapdog and do everything she says, because no woman likes a lapdog. You are, in fact, damned if you do and damned if you don't. So let's not act as though the Green Party is introducing some kind of out there policy, the likes of which we've never seen. This isn't even the Overton window being pushed. It's just the fungal infection of romantic chivalry growing at the rate at which a fungal infection generally grows. It's how families are expected to operate. And so, of course, it's how corporate environments are going to work and how national governments are supposed to work and how international governments are going to work. You may think it's irrelevant because there's no way the Green Party is ever going to be in power, but the Green Party is just a beacon of the future. It's like a dog in an earthquake. It notices the micro tremors moments before the macro tremors start happening. Whatever the Green Party is talking about, the Labour Party is going to pick it up and run with it, followed by the Conservatives, followed by Reform. None of these parties are acting as bulwarks against the seismic waves of this simpitude. All they do is argue about hokey shite like immigration, while the feminism crashes its way through everything completely unopposed. So yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to become illegal for a man to disagree with a woman in any way, and then it's going to become illegal for a man to agree with a woman in any way, because that's benevolent misogyny. It is going to become illegal to be a man. Effectively at first, and then literally. This country's authorities are hell-bent on destroying its people. Dick first. And it's not going to stop. Because the only people who think they're defeating it are busy patting themselves on the back and sucking their own dicks in the deluded assumption that they've already defeated it. Get the fuck out of Dodge, people. Join me in escaping to America, where we might have another 20 years or so before exactly the same thing happens over there. Or maybe we could all just stop fucking simping. Like for a goddamn nanosecond. That might help. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know nothing. I just work here. All right, go on, Hannah.
All right. So a little lesson in the difference between misandry and misogyny, right? When women talk about men, and I'm not going to say feminist this time because tradcons do this too, right? Non-feminist women do this. Anti-feminists do this. And sometimes even men who are not identifying as feminist do this because of the way they were raised to think about men and women. When they talk about men, they talk about men from the lowest common denominator as opposed to the highest common denominator, right? The men who are the most admirable get little mention when you're talking about the entire gender. Instead, they want to talk about the less than 0.1% of the world population who engages in criminal violence. And that's not all criminal violence against women. In fact, most of it is against other men who are not in that 0.1% or less, or who are, because there's also rival gangs, right? And only a tiny percent of that criminal violence targets women, as opposed to the vast majority of it, which targets men. And so they'll say things like men are dangerous. And when they say dangerous, they don't mean that men have a capacity to use violence to cause injury, whether they do it or not. They mean men are likely to use violence instead of diplomacy and cause injury to get what they want. When in reality, 99.9+% of men don't do that. And nobody bats an eye. Nobody acts like, well, that's hateful. That's a hateful, harmful, negative stereotype that has been used to disarm men. It's been used to treat men as persona non gratis in professions that actually they're badly needed there. It's been used to enact all kinds of discriminatory measures. It's been used to deny men access to help when they are abused, when they're crime victims, when they are in an educational setting and they need help there. All kinds of, it's been used to get men fired. Right? I know a guy. I talk to him all the time on X that literally has been fired based on that stereotype, just because he's male and didn't want to face that discrimination. So when we talk about misandry, we talk about the use of discriminatory law and policy to keep men from having the same advantages of modern civilization as women, because they are men, and because men don't get judged individually. They don't get judged by what they personally do and nothing else. They get judged as part of the gender that is more likely to be the guilty party in that less than 0.1% of the world population that engages in criminal violence. They're part of the gender that gets exploited as cannon fodder in wars, whether they're on the right side or the wrong side of the war. And that is if there is a right side and a wrong side. Because in some wars, as we have become more and more aware of late, in most wars, it's not that cut and dried. And in some wars, there is absolutely not a right side. There's just two wrong sides, and they're going at it, and they've been going at it for centuries. And it's almost always men that get exploited in that situation, used to kill each other until they're gone, they die, and then more men are forced to step in and take their place. That's misandry. That's the treatment of men as completely disposable, completely unimportant in terms of, do we need to keep these people alive? Do we need to have compassion for them? Do we need to care what happens to them? Or are they just replaceable? Women complain when women are generalized, right? Women complain when you say, well, women aren't necessarily as strong as men. And this is not saying that all women are weak and all men are strong. But in general, women are not as strong as men. Oh, misogyny, you can't say that. No, that's not misogyny. It's bullshit to call that misogyny. That's an observation. It's a factual observation to say if you run across a violent crime, the perpetrator is more likely male than female. It is a hasty generalization to say if you run into a stranger and the stranger is male, they're more likely to attack you than not because of that. It's not a hasty generalization to say that, for the most part, men have greater physical strength, endurance, and so on than women. But we hear misogyny from that. Right? It's not misogyny to get angry when women misbehave. It's not misogyny to get angry when women misbehave in a way that is unique to women. If it's misbehavior, it's criticism of the misbehavior. It's not criticism of the sex. If you're doing harm to someone and you get criticized for it, your sex doesn't get you out of jail free, right? It might in the actual legal system, but in terms of right and wrong, it's not hate to suggest that it's not okay for you to hurt people just because of your sex. And unfortunately, when feminists use the word misogyny, the overwhelming majority of the time, that's what they're talking about. Right? So let's look at the minority of the time that people used to say, well, misogyny is real. It's just a little more rare than you think. Right? Well, give me an example. Give me an example of that. When I ask for that, most of the time, I get told about crimes that for centuries were only criminal acts if a woman was the victim, but both sexes do them to each other, like sexual violence. And the minute that I point out, well, actually, women do this too. It's not just a male behavior. It's not limited to adults. It's even young people do this. This is something that it's a human dysfunction, and you only care about it when it happens to women, but you don't care about it when men are the victims and women are the perpetrators. And by the way, in a survey in which they gave information about their own sexual aggression from zero, like consent, zero sexual aggression, to 100% using a weapon to force themselves on someone. In between there, they had a whole bunch of different things. One of them was having taken advantage of somebody's age, having exploited an underage boy for sex. And 3 in 10 of the women on that survey said they had done that. It's almost a third, right? One was taking advantage of someone's intoxicated state. Approximately 2/3 said they had done that. And a third said that they had administered the intoxicant. Right? So I'm not talking about something where I'm comparing 1% of rapists being female to 99% being male, like feminists like to say. I'm talking about women confessing to doing this type of thing on a rather large scale, and laws just don't recognize it. Research often doesn't recognize it. Feminist research actually uses definitions that exclude forcing coitus on a man if you're female, because he's forced to penetrate, or he's forcibly enveloped and not penetrated, and therefore the research doesn't call it rape. Right? If the roles were reversed, if research was done defining a crime in every way except how it's done to women, we would call that misogyny. Right? But instead, if you notice that they did that, and you point out that actually these crimes are done by both sexes, and both sexes experience them from both sexes, and the problem is not gendered, you get called a misogynist. Misogyny there isn't used because you're hating on women. It's used because you are not going along with a narrative to excuse hating on men. Right? So when feminists are saying you're a misogynist to me at that point, misogyny is defined as refusing to hate men. Misogyny is defined as refusing to give women a pass on things they do to men just because they're women and they suddenly deserve this pass for being women. Right? That's not hate. That's refusing to accept someone enforcing their privilege. And so I ask for another example. Ask for real examples. Give me a real example of hatred against women, actual misogyny. The next thing that I'm handed is usually examples of young men who, after being raised by a single mom who didn't take care of them and took them to have pills, thrown at them instead of helping them with their mental health conditions that were caused by being raised without a dad, or possibly genetic, right? Who instead of imploding like most guys do when they go off the deep end, the few times that guys go off the deep end, they exploded and didn't have flattering things to say about women, or they targeted women. And quite often, their complaints are not invalid, but their response is over the top, right? So instead of just going off on a rant, they killed people. But is it actually misogyny? Or are they responding to real life events in the most dysfunctional possible way? And is it misandry when people do that and the majority of people they kill are men? Or is it that we only want to label it when people do that and the majority of the victims are female? Because that's really what's going on there. Most of the time, when there is a mass shooter, they either target both sexes equally or they mostly go after men and boys. And, nobody says anything. Nobody suggests that that's misandry. Nobody suggests that maybe maybe the men and boys were targeted because of their sex. And in fact, if it's all white men and boys who get killed, or mostly white men and boys, and they target an activity or area where the people there are going to mostly be white men and boys, all of a sudden, law enforcement and the media can't figure out a motive. They have no idea what caused this, right? But if most of the victims are women, it's obviously because they're women. So the logic is a little short there. And again, that's the misogyny myth. If something happens to women, we assume it's because they're women. Even though if something happens to men, we don't assume it's because they're men, even when it's blatantly obvious that it is. So I don't believe in misogyny. Right? The worst possible examples that people have given me when I've looked into them indicate that the cause of the action that they were calling misogynistic was extreme dysfunction. And the people behind that cause may have been women. And that pretty much ends it for me right there. Somebody is reacting to what women did and they react by targeting other women. They're not doing it because they hate women, that they're just misogynistic. They're simply doing it because they're nuts. They've lost their minds, and that's again not hatred. So misogyny isn't real. I don't believe in it. I don't accept other people's belief in it. I think it is nothing but a power grab, right? The use of the term misogyny to act as a thought-terminating cliche. And this is really just your government in the UK looking for ways to prevent you from talking, looking for ways to hold such great control over you that if you in any way resist your government, they can then turn around and accuse you of this ism or phobia, and you go to jail. Right? It's not even about giving women power. Women will think it is, and those fucking dipshits will go along with it. Many of them will think this is a great thing that now that they are going to be able to get a little of their own back after centuries and centuries of men building all of civilization just to make women comfortable. How dare they? But they're going to end up too late figuring out that actually this was never about them. Just like giving the women the vote was never about women. It was about giving the government more power, giving the people whose asses sit in the seats that make legislation, that decide who goes to war and who stays home, that are pocketing your money for doing nothing for you. It's about them and how much control they have over you. So don't buy this. If you listen to me in the last rant, this is just another reason why young men need to take over control of the political arena in every Western nation. This is what happens when you give women political control. They do stupid shit like this. They hand over immense power to people who don't give a flying fuck about them or you. They think they've won something. And by the time they figure out what they've done, it's going to be too late.
All right. Thank you for your thoughts on that. I do have a story that's related, so I'm going to save my thoughts until after the second one because they're basically like the same thing. I don't know how powerful the Green Party is in the UK. Like, we have a Green Party in the States. It might just be the same in name only, but the Greens are very small. Like, they're less relevant than the Libertarian Party, and that's saying something. Yeah, and so it doesn't surprise me, obviously, because that there is a Green Party and they have this sort of belief system, but I don't know how consequential they are. But the next story, that's gonna change things a little bit. I got a Rumble rant from NovaFan21 who gives us $1 and says, UK cucks, our level of censorship is better than Russia because we don't throw wrong thinkers in the gulag. UK 2025, hold my soy. Thank you.
Are you having a laugh? I presume that was sarcasm.
I think it's sarcasm. Okay. So, let's see. Nobody else has any other things, so we're going to move on to the next story, which is similar, but not quite the same. So, the UK Labour government is set to announce a comprehensive strategy to have violence against women and girls within a decade. So they have a plan, guys. with a key focus.
Cut in half, not have as in HAVE.
No, have HALVE.
For
cut
people
in
who are
half.
listening but can't actually see the screen.
They're gonna halve violence.
It just occurred to me because I wasn't looking at the screen, even though I've seen this story.
Have violence with a key focus on prevention through mandatory school curriculum changes. So basically, because this is the way they operate, change the system, change the boy. All boys will receive lessons on respecting women and girls. Respect is institutionalized now with 2 C's, respect. Respecting women and girls, challenging misogynistic comments and behavior, and building healthy relationships, standardizing what has been a patchwork approach across schools. New statutory guidance will help teachers and parents identify early signs of radicalization by online misogynists like Andrew Tate, whose influence is cited in research showing over 40% of young men view him as cool, and 40% of teenage relationships involve abuse? This is the study that they're claiming. Additional measures include peer mentoring schemes where boys support classmates in rejecting harmful attitudes, restrictions on social media to curb access to toxic content, and proactive programs like police-led classes in primaries. This initiative, delayed by internal debates but described as the largest crackdown in history, shifts emphasis from victim-focused policies to targeting perpetrators' root causes in schools, homes, and online. Basically pre-crime, driven by alarming statistics that they're using as impetus for this, such as apparently there have been 3.2 million offenses against women annually. I'd like to get some more data that's precise on that, though. The strategy spans multiple departments and builds on the Online Safety Act in response to criticisms of prior efforts for ineffectiveness, aiming to, quote, deploy the full power of the state, end quote. Oh, wow, leftists using the state? Crazy. Through a policy blitz starting December of 2025, which is right now. So
I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, but are we really going to act like we don't already do that? Like we don't already teach boys to respect girls? Like we don't already have this universal rule that boys should never hit girls? Like no matter what. No matter how much shit you get from girls, you should just take it and hope that they respect you for it, which they won't. It's like the happy wife, happy life bullshit. We're already compelled to keep women in this bubble, protecting them from accountability. This is already taught to us in families and in schools and in universities and in every corporate environment and in every government environment. And that covers just about everything. So again, all I'm hearing is we're going to do what we already do, but we're going to do it even harder. We've spent centuries telling men to treat women like royalty. And for some reason, that doesn't appear to be fostering an egalitarian mindset between the sexes. So our only option from here on in is to get boys to treat women like goddesses. And then those filthy misogynist boys will finally realize that everyone is equal. We're not going to spend so much as a hot second teaching girls to respect boys or women to respect men, because clearly that's not the problem. And no matter what happens, it could never be a problem. And you know what else we're going to do? We're going to keep flooding the country with families from foreign cultures who are not already accustomed to our romantic chivalric ways. And we're going to keep teaching them that they are the victims, even if they happen to be male. We're being presented with this statistic that 40% of young men view Andrew Tate positively, and we're led to conclude that 60% of them do not. Does that mean that every young man has heard of Andrew Tate? Really? How the fuck did that happen? I'm surprised that 40% of young men have even heard of him. School children generally aren't interested in gender politics. They're interested in watching kooky, farty cartoon characters playing video games. How on earth have so many of them heard of Andrew Tate to the point that 40% of them agree with him. And I think it's because this is what they're being taught in schools. We've been told that this is what's happening. In some lesson or another, school children are being presented with Andrew Tate content, and they're being quizzed on their reaction to it. I don't know why. I don't know what subject this falls under. Maths? Science? Humanities? Well, I guess humanities is the closest we'll get, but apparently in some class or other, children in school who have never heard of Andrew Tate are being shown selective clips of his content, and then they're being asked, do you agree with what he says? Like, I would think if you don't want to poison children's brains with the verboten thoughts of the misogynist devil, maybe you should just leave it out of the school curriculum in the first place. I don't know. I'm not a real teacher. None of this is educational advice. But yeah, these students come into school having never heard of this guy, but then you show them his content and you quiz them on it, and evidently 40% of the male students respond, yeah, I think he's talking sense. They're like, yeah, I think this Muslim man waxing lyrical about how all these white heathen bitches I'm trafficking for money deserve to be trafficked for money because they're all fucking whores. And by sheer coincidence, this comes at a time when 40% of the students in any given metropolitan British school are Muslims. And again, it never occurs to anyone that we should stop flooding the country with Muslims, or that we should stop teaching foreign Muslims that British people are all irredeemable, degenerate war criminals who deserve to be colonized and replaced. Heavens to Djibouti. No, because that kind of solution would neglect to punish British boys. And if the solution doesn't punish British boys, it is no solution at all. And so on and so on. We as the education system must refer to the progressive stack at all times. We don't know what to do about British girls because they're in the middle of the stack. We don't know what to do about foreign boys because they too are in the middle of the stack. We can't risk pitting them against each other because that might make us look bad. All we can do is look to the bottom of the stack. We can do anything we like to those worthless, wasted little cunts that we call straight white British males. It doesn't matter that they're children. We're not in the business of protecting children. We are schools. We are in the business of torturing straight white males of any age. That is all we are permitted to do, and it is all we are interested in doing. You want education? Science, mathematics? Never heard of it. What the fuck kind of far-right indoctrination is that? Nah, I've never heard anything so foul. Fuck off to Russia and get killed by drones, all of you. That's another story we're not covering tonight, by the way. Something I mentioned 2 weeks ago on the Thursday show. Young British men are about to be subjected to what Ukrainian men were subjected to. Look at the photographs if you dare. Good times, wholesome times. At this point, I welcome death. To be honest, I envy the people who died before all this shit happened. They truly lived and died in heaven. It feels like the rapture already happened, and we've been left behind, doesn't it? Food for thought. Scraps of food for scraps of thought. Do with it as you will. I am done. I will probably die soon, so someone else talk.
Well, the tough thing about this, I just had a conversation with somebody about this on X. Actually, several people, but there was one dipshit. But the dipshit notwithstanding, you look at this situation. And you think about the history of people not listening to men who have spoken up for boys. It's not short, right? 100 years ago, young men could get trapped in fact, more than 100 years ago now, young men could get trapped in social scams in which a woman would get them into a compromising position and then claim that they took advantage of her and sue them, and they could be treated as though they had been imposing on her, as opposed to her flirting and so on, or trap them in a situation where they appear to be the other guy in a love triangle and get trapped that way and get sued or blackmailed. Yeah, that's right, Art Force. You look up honeypots and the badger game on unknownmisandry.com, I believe it is. It's a blog spot. Let me see if I can look it up really quick. Because I want to make sure I give you the right. Yeah, I'll have to find it because it's not where I thought it was. But it's the history of misandry in law, and there's news article after news article. It's an interesting blog. Maybe I can find it. There we go. Unknown history of misandry, and it's unknown misandry. Yeah, it is unknownmisandry.blogspot.com. I just typed it in wrong. But on the right hand side of the page, you will find the badger game is one. The honeypot listing is another one. There's domestic violence, divorce racketeering, female serial killers, child kidnappers, cesarean kidnapping. This has quite a bit of information about things that feminists don't want you to know about, don't want you to think about when you think about female behavior. But in any case, there were people talking about that at the time. There were people objecting to that at the time. There were people suggesting that young men should have some recourse when they are lied about in the legal system, or when they are blackmailed by a woman who behaves this way. Ernest Beltford Bax wrote about that, and people did not listen to him. He wrote about a lot of things, including suffrage, women's suffrage, and women's unwillingness to live up to the same responsibilities as men, but demand to have all the same rights as men. So this has been going on for a while, right? And this fight between feminists and the rest of society goes all the way back to the 19th century, early 19th century, when the UK decided legally to change from a default in divorce from paternal custody, since fathers were the ones with the property and the money to make sure that children had everything they need, to maternal custody, because a feminist said that God wanted children to be with their mothers during their tender years. It's called the tender years doctrine. And it was real. This is exactly the argument that she made. She made it in long form, but it is the argument she made. That's the way God made it, and that's the way that we should do things. And they listened to her. So divorce changed from paternal custody and the mother not having any incentive to leave to maternal custody, child support, maintenance, and so on, and the woman having economic incentive to leave, and it got worse from there. during the latter half of the 20th century, you had multiple organizations. Dr. Warren Farrell has written several books, including the book on the boy crisis and the crisis for boys in education. And of course, you have A Voice for Men, you have the National Coalition for Men, Fathers for Justice. Like, there's dozens of men's issues groups that have been pointing out to greater society, to authorities, to women, to anything that they could, to anyone who would listen. Nobody listened, right? You had the nice guys. You had the guys who would work with political parties, who would work with mothers groups, who would even, if they had to, work with feminists. Right? Even if they had to, they would reach across the aisle as long as men and boys would get consideration equal to that of women and girls, or at least some consideration, at least have some recourse. National Coalition for Men, for instance, when they fought for male victims of domestic violence to receive consideration under California law, they didn't ask for shelters. They just asked for vouchers for guys to get out of their situation and into a hotel room or an apartment for a period of time so they could get back on their feet. They weren't asking for a lot. They were just asking for some consideration for men and boys. They fought for men who have children to have some consideration in court, to not be treated as the default non-parent when there's a divorce, to not be treated as the at-fault party in no-fault divorce. And they've been rebuffed and rebuffed and rebuffed throughout history. It was a long, hard fight to get joint custody allowed, as opposed to maternal custody with paternal visitation that the mother could just ignore. It's been a long, hard fight to get shared parenting, as opposed to the father having no say over what happens at the doctor's office or in school. And then it's been a long, hard fight to get some states, not all states, but some states in the U.S., to allow equally shared parenting. I don't think that happens anywhere in the UK. And the UK is behind us on that, just like they were with joint custody and shared parenting agreements. And they'll probably be behind us forever on that, even though they seem to be the advanced party when it came to taking fathers' custody rights away. They haven't listened. They haven't listened the entire time. They haven't listened when they had the mild speakers, the men who just wanted some consideration, just wanted the education system to not throw boys completely under the bus in celebration of all that girl power. At least give them an education too. At least make sure when they graduate high school, they can read, they can write, they can do arithmetic, they know their history, they can go to university or they can go to trade school. They have a pathway to get a job and support themselves. That's all people were asking. Due process in court cases where they've been accused of crimes. Making sure that innocent guys are not convicted of things they did not do because evidence wasn't required. None of that is a bridge too far, but it was all treated as a bridge too far. Now you've got Andrew Tate. I don't fucking feel sorry for you. You got this dipshit that says 2 or 3 right things and 100 wrong things every time he talks. Okay, fine. That's what it takes to get you to notice that men and boys are in crisis and have been for a long time. Then fine. There's your loudmouth. Now, will you listen to the men in the men's rights movement who have for 100 years been asking you to just recognize that due process rights shouldn't be compromised just because the person who's been accused is male and the accuser is female. And that a public education, a right to a public education, shouldn't be compromised just because the student is male and you're in girl power mode. That kids need their fathers and fathers need their children. Right? Can you listen to those guys now? And maybe if you had listened to those guys and you weren't housing so many kids in man deserts where they don't see a single male role model in their entire neighborhood, much less their home, you wouldn't have this problem. Maybe they're listening to Mr. Tate because he's the only adult man around them that talks any sense. You should have listened.
Yeah.
And I've said this before, and I will say it again. If you don't want boys falling for some con artist who only wants to sell them pictures of naked women, then listen to the men that actually care about them and stop demonizing the men's rights movement.
Seems simple enough. But I don't think they want to solve men's problems because high functioning men that are revered and supported in society create a society that doesn't need the government.
True.
So men don't have problems. Men are the problems.
Yes.
That's the only way they can look at it.
So this is why they hobble them. And this is why instead of simply like looking at the problem dispassionately, let's say there is a problem, looking at it dispassionately and like doing the most logical thing, which I assume has a lot to do with recent demographic shifts, then you can probably do something about it from that standpoint. But also, creating new systems or ministries or government departments or arms of the state or whatever to put into legislation more taxpayer funded initiatives that probably will never get to where they need to because there's so much red tape and so many go-betweens that are going to be collecting, and it's not going to solve the problem. You cannot solve this problem with the state. It just can't do it. That's all I'll say about it. You guys have said plenty on this. The state cannot fix men's issues. I saw the Tin Man put out a post. He's a very popular men's issues advocate, and he lives in the UK, and he is constantly going on about how the government isn't doing enough for men and boys, or they're putting too much focus on women and girls. And I don't know how many times it has to happen before he realizes that what is happening to boys and men is done by the state on purpose. So they have no incentive of changing it. None. They don't. Like that, they are the reason men are in the situation. Okay? So that's all I'll say. You can't create we're going to make new rules. We're going to make new laws. We're going to make new classes. We're going to make a new program. No, none of that's going to work, guys. You can't do it. You're completely disconnected. What you have to do is you have to look at what is going on at the familial level and find out how you are contributing to the problems there. Now, I can't speak for the UK, but in America, our problems stem from fatherlessness and the broken family. And that is being perpetuated by things like no-fault divorce, presumed custody going to the mother, and the welfare state and SNAP and, all of those things, right? And that's the problem. The fatherlessness problem is a problem of the system excluding them in particular. And when you remove those barriers, which doesn't require the state to do something, it actually requires the state to do less of something, then the problem addresses itself. But the problem with that is the state has no interest in making itself less relevant. It's like, why do feminists never stop going on and on about the newest version of misogyny or systemic patriarchy or whatever it is? Well, because their job is not actually to address women's issues. Their job is to stay relevant so they can stay getting paid and they can keep getting their tenure and they can keep staying in power. And all of the stuff that we've been talking about on the show today are all the various ways they do that. So yes, you can't solve the problem of men and boys with the state. You just can't. But anyway, we're going to move on to the next story. Let me see if you guys put anything in. No, you didn't. All right, this is kind of a long sausage. We got one more we have to follow up on. And, oh shit, I don't have a graphic for this. Hold on, I got to get one. But I'll read the thing out while I'm getting the graphic. So we have a follow-up on that on Black Lives Matter news. Tashella Sherry Amore Dickerson, 52, of Oklahoma City, who served as executive director of Black Lives Matter OKC since at least 2016, has been indicted by a federal grand jury on December 3rd, 2025 on 20, it was unsealed about 5 days ago, so on the 11th, on 20 counts of wire fraud and 5 counts of money laundering. Whoa, BLM was like scamming people? Crazy. I thought they were just about the struggle. Not a registered 501c3 tax-exempt organization, raised over $5.6 million starting 2020, largely from national bail funds and grants routed through its fiscal sponsor, the Alliance for Global Justice, intended for posting pretrial bail during racial justice protests following George Floyd's death, with portions allowed for a revoking bail fund for social justice purposes. From June 2020 through at least October 2025, Dickerson allegedly diverted at least $3.15 million in return bail checks into her personal accounts rather than BLM OKC's, using the funds for personal expenses, including recreational travel to Jamaica and the Dominican Republic, tens of thousands in retail shopping, over $50,000 in food and grocery deliveries for herself and her children, a personal vehicle, and 6 Oklahoma City real properties deeded to her or her solely controlled company called, get this guys, her name of her company, Equity International, LLC. Dickerson also allegedly submitted false annual reports to AFGJ via interstate wires, claiming funds were used solely for tax-exempt purposes without disclosing personal benefits. If convicted, she faces up to 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine per wire fraud count, and up to 10 years and $250,000. Up to 10 years and a $250,000 fine, or twice the laundered amount per money laundering count. Whew. The case, investigated by the FBI and IRS criminal investigation, emphasizes that charges are allegations and Dickerson is presumed innocent until proven guilty. The indictment is unrelated to broader probes into other Black Lives Matter entities, but follows patterns seen in prior unrelated cases involving misuse of BLM-affiliated funds.
I just want to point out that the leader of Black Lives Matter looted Black Lives Matter. Just saying.
Yeah,
I don't have anything before I go on.
I really hope we remember this the next time it happens. A lot of people assume that BLM only emerged in 2020. No, it was around many years before that. It was developed in universities. It was incubated, only to be holstered in the arsenal of these Marxist tyrants, ready to be shot through both barrels at the most expedient moment. That moment was 2020. Well, it's going to happen again. I'd like to say it won't happen under the guise of BLM. I'd like to say that the people have learned their lesson never to trust BLM again, or these Marxists ever again. And so they'll have to try something else, like fucking Latinx lives matter. That does seem to be what they're leaning towards at this point. But I get the queasiest feeling that people haven't learned their lesson. I think the same thing's probably going to happen in 2028. There will probably be another quote-unquote pandemic and another international flaring of riots just to make sure President J.D. Vance never happens. And I think people are going to fall for it all over again. It doesn't matter how many boomers die between now and then, because boomers were never the problem. Gen X isn't going to save you. Gen X was in charge during the previous atrocity, and they'll still be in charge for the next one. And 20 years after that, they'll be teaming up with the millennials. Just imagine how worse shit is going to get when the millennials are fully in charge with some backup from the Gen Xers. Like I said, this isn't getting better, and it's not going to get better. It's going to get a lot worse until we break out of this false hope that these savior complex fagaloons are dragging us into. The fagaloons of all manner of generations. And we can't wait for the Zoomers to save us either. The Zoomers are full of insane oikophobes as well. Nick Fuentes doesn't represent the Zoomers. He only represents a faction of the Zoomers, a faction that's going to get completely shut down by the insufferable communists of Gen X and the millennials. This generational warfare is not the vector of anything we need to pay attention to. We need someone to get in there. Someone who doesn't buy into this fake gang rivalry of generational identity politics. Someone who's willing to say, I don't give a shit about the Jets or the Sharks. You can all eat my balls. We're not interested in these goddamn zodiac signs. We're here to take what's ours. Generations be fucked. Because generations don't matter. What matters is nationalities. What? Yeah. That's what needs to happen. And good luck and God bless with all that. And when it happens, it won't be a moment too soon. Go on, Anna.
So I guess the the countdown to the use of the term misogyny as a cover for this woman's wrongdoing occurs and becomes the prevalent narrative, or what is the term, misogynoir. I've heard this from feminists on X quite a bit, that there is a unique brand of the hatred that doesn't exist for women that specifically targets Black women as opposed to all other women. And again, you have the race baiting that goes with, but the primary allegation is that you hate them first because they are women. Nothing to do with the fact that the leader of Black Lives Matter looted Black Lives Matter, and she thought she would get away with it. And if we had an administration that was behaving the way the previous administration did with regard to playing fast and loose with law and law enforcement, she probably would have gotten away with it. But that's not what happened. We had a totally different administration elected, and they did not let her get away with it. And so now she's in trouble. Yes, murder of crows. It's you have to look. There's quite a bit of posts on X that I've run into with this term, misogynoir. Because, of course, it's not enough to say you hate women. You must now say that you hate Black women because they are women, and also because they are Black. But mostly because they're women. right? And that therefore, the only reason that you wouldn't let this poor, innocent, downtrodden, beaten down, not cared about, discriminated against historical victim, in the Groucho Marx sense of it. No, it wasn't Groucho Marx. It was Slip Mahoney. This woman's historical. Get a doctor. And I actually think that one was Satch. But yeah, historical victim. That you only hate her, not because of the things that she's done, but because she's a woman and black. You just have to have that added victimhood, right? That's how the progressive stack works. And as long as you can hide behind your position in the progressive stack, you're supposed to get away with anything, up to and including massive fraud. But believe it or not, it's not the only reason why I dropped this into the news show. Not even the connection with BLM. I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here. There's a thing that women do, and we don't know exactly how often they do it. There's some indication if you generalize DNA tests where there is already existing doubt as to who the father is, and you generalize that to say the general population, whether there's doubt or not as to who the father is, could be up to a third of women who lie about who the father of their child is in order to get a man to support them and their child his whole life. That they don't tell the father, oh no, it's somebody else's. It's not really the father. You're not the father. Somebody else is the father. No, they make him the father, in quotes, so that they can get that support. And then this man will work his entire life, from marriage until death do them part, or just a few years before that when he finally retires. And the minute he starts to rest, he starts developing severe health problems and eventually passes away anyway, to support her and the child that's not his. And we get told when we complain about child support that it costs over $250,000 to raise a child. And this money's coming from a man that's not the child's father, who doesn't get an opportunity to say, I don't want to do this if that's not my kid, because he's lied to. She perpetrates fraud against him. Right? So if you do that to your own company, right, you do that to your own cause, to people that donated money to you, you can get 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine for basically laundering half that amount. I think that would be fair for paternity fraud. If a woman tells a man he's the father of her child and he's not, and she gets busted, instead of saying, well, you've been the reputed father of this child for 7 years, you owe the child support that she wants. Instead, she can go to jail for 20 years, and however much benefit she's had from that, she's fined twice as much. And the amount that the father paid to support that child, she has to pay him back on top of that. I think that would be fair. I think we should do the same thing when women lie and they get caught lying about the paternity of a child. I think that makes sense, right? And I think if a man asks for a paternity test, in fact, hospitals should offer that to every father. When a baby is born, the father should be offered the opportunity, without the mother knowing, for a paternity test. And they should not be able to turn him down if he says, yes, I want that. Period. No holds barred, no pass go. Do not collect $200 from the wrong father. It's only fair. And similarly, if a woman files a child support case against a guy that she's not married to, and she says, I know for a fact that man is the father, when in fact there's a possibility that it's someone else, she should have to recover his costs for him. She should have to pay him back. If he has to go pay for a paternity test, she should have to pay him back for that. If he has to go to court and he has court costs, she should have to pay him back for that. And before anybody goes, oh, that's going to be too much hardship on these young mothers, tough. Don't fuck around and not know who the father of your child is. Don't try to claim someone is the father of your child if you know he's not the father. And maybe have some consideration of your potential outcomes before you decide to have sex in the first place. But don't whine about it when you face consequences. That's what you've been telling men for decades. So there's my take on the BLM thing. Besides the fact that BLM looted BLM and now is busted and probably going to use misogyny as a shield. This is the same treatment, I think, that paternity fraud should elicit. Every single time.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's no need for me to get a graphic up on the screen. But yeah, BLM looted itself, and that kind of seems like appropriate and inevitable. So, not surprised. But, it is what it is. So, they were run by a bunch of fat, black, angry lesbians.
Beta!
So, that was, I'm just glad they're being exposed, more or less. I don't think it'll fix any of my friendships that have been destroyed over what happened, but whatever. All right. Well, anyway, with that said, we're going to go into the Patreon show now. This was a super long sausage, and we got to get this done. So if you guys want to join us for that, we're going to be looking at this article from lens.monash.edu. That asks the question, misogyny is thriving in our schools. Why aren't we doing more? So if you want to join us for that, please become a member. Go to feedthebadger.com. $5 a month will get you into Discord, where you'll be able to watch all the additional content, including this after show. Please consider joining our community. There's always lots of fun stuff going on there. And I just want to say to Mike and Hannah, thank you so much for giving your thoughts on today's stories. And I want to thank you guys, most of all, for tuning in to the show. If you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about what we talked about in the show today. And please, please, please share this video, because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR News, and we will see you next Tuesday.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.